So one of the most common comments I get on this channel goes something like this. I saw X NBA player, fill in the blank, wearing this shoe that you said you didn't like for this particular person or reason. Why would they wear that? You must be wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't play basketball. You're not an athlete, yada, yada, yada. And although that might be true, there is a reason why there is such a big difference between what sometimes you see at the local gym or shoes you see me saying I like versus ones you see professional athletes in. And no more evident was that than when I was logging shoes for week 1 of the NBA season. Not just what the top 10 shoes were, but what the similarities were between them and across brands, right? It wasn't just one brand and people wearing a certain type of shoe in one brand. It was across all brands. Then I went and looked at the professional tennis tour and I saw the exact same thing. You know, you start to look at it, you start to see like, okay, and you start to realize what priorities are in professional sports versus what priorities are for weekend warriors, amateurs, high school players, collegiate players. And so in this video, I want to go over why it's usually not a good idea to base your buying decision in terms of shoes off of your favorite professional basketball player, tennis player, whatever. Even if they might have the same body type as you, they might weigh around the same, and they might have the same, history of illness as you or injury as you, or even the same game style. Let's get into it. Now, the idea for this video was born from another video I just did, which is where I looked at every single shoe that was worn during week 1 of the NBA, from bench warmers all the way to the starters. And this theme just kept popping up over and over again. It didn't matter what brand the shoe was, there was a very similar theme in terms of type of shoe that an overwhelming majority of NBA players are wearing. Now, you could make the argument that all these players being sponsored by Nike and to a lesser extent Adidas and Jordan brand, and you could make the argument that a lot of players want to honor Kobe Bryant, and that's why they wear his shoes. But if you look at the other shoes that people are wearing, take the GT Cut 3, that was the number 3 shoe, and it's a direct descendant of the Kobe line. I mean, that shoe, to me, isn't as good as a lot of the Kobe's, but it's the GT Cut Turbo is, that's a whole other video, but its pedigree is that of the Kobe. And I don't know of anybody who's trying to honor the greater than line from Nike, right? Yet they're still wearing it. The Book 1, right? The Sabrina 2 and 3. No one is trying to honor Devin Booker, or Sabrina Ionescu, right? Yeah, they're great players, and I like them, but I don't see anybody, that's not factoring into people's minds. And so the argument that people are just doing it because of Kobe, I don't buy that. But as you go down the list of top 10 shoes into the top 20 shoes, a theme just keeps popping up. And that is flexible, lightweight, low to the ground shoes that have access to a lot of freedom of movement and can be used for very nimble footwork. And that's a huge difference between things on this channel that I say I like. Take Cooper Flag. And I thought this was the most telling thing on this list. Now, number 1, the New Balance Hezi Low V2 was by far the most commonly used shoe in the New Balance line in the NBA. Now, go back to my review of the Hezi Low V2. What did I say? Not notice any instability in these when I was playing in them. The flange is actually pretty broad in them. I still would say these are probably a no-go for ankle sprainers. And let's face it, the two-way V4, the Fresh Foam BB V2 are some of the best shoes out there for ankle sprainers out there, so why wouldn't you just grab one of those? Yet, there was one person using the BBV3, one person using the two-way. I mean, that's changing. People are going back and forth with shoes. And then you had more people using the Hezi Low V2 than those two combined, including Cooper Flag, who, huge NBA prospect, has his whole career to think about. The dude is enormous, right? So he's got to protect his feet for a long NBA career if he wants to be successful, and yet he chose the Hezi Low V2, the one shoe in the New Balance line. I said, get the other one. And so it just goes to show you what is being prioritized even by someone like him. And that's where it gets to the differences in a professional athlete, even versus a very elite amateur athlete. There are just things that they prioritize in their career versus things that we prioritize, because a professional player only has so long. And all we ever talk about is, not we, but people on ESPN and sports talk radio, talk about how short the lifespan of a professional athlete is and how fast the game is getting, right? Especially basketball, tennis, right? I mean, these games are just getting so quick. And so you've got a choice. Either I get a shoe that might be weigh a little bit more, or in tennis, I need to get all the speed I can get because the game is moving so fast. And so now you've got athletes saying, well, I can, usually get these shoes custom molded, because most professional athletes, most professional basketball players, except for the lower rung bench warmers, and even some of them, are getting shoes custom lasted to their foot. So they're all the same shape as their foot. I mean, just having a shoe custom shaped to your foot is gonna solve so many problems for you versus someone like me or you, we're just getting stock versions of the shoe. The next thing is that a lot of top tier athletes, not all professional athletes, but a lot of top tier athletes do get specific customizations in their shoes, whether that be more dense foam, less dense foam, higher stack foam, a different shank setup. That's like the top 10% are actually getting custom, actually custom shoes, because to put a shoe through a different mold when using the same materials, not that big of a deal. To make a completely different inside of a shoe using the same mold as a stock shoe, that does cost a lot of money. So that is reserved for the very top players, but they're all using custom orthotics. And an orthotic can make up for a lot of different things, especially if it is a custom orthotic. So if you take a look at one of these here, like I've got two different types of orthotics. You could have one that is super thick with all sorts of material on it. You can have a very thin orthotic in there and just do a little customizations here or there. And it's, it's correcting for different deformities. So you got to figure, a lot of times athletes will think, okay, I can use the orthotic to correct for some of these, and then I can wear the lighter shoe. I can get the shoe that's going to allow maybe a little bit more range of motion, a little bit more freedom of movement. If I get injured, or if I have to pay for this on the back end in my late 30s or in my 40s and 50s, well, so be it. At least I've made my money in the league, and at least I've made my money on the tour. And that's where you start to see the difference. Someone like me, who is trying to be active for the rest of my life, I don't care about results. I could care less if I win or lose playing anything. Whether I'm playing, tennis, a pickup game of basketball, if I'm playing pickleball, I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care if I win or lose. I just want to go out there and get a good workout and, get the dopamine hit from going out and playing. That's what I care about. And so then what I start thinking about, especially as a podiatrist, and I see people come in my office who are just wrecked because they have to be in a boot now for 6 to 8 weeks because they had a stress fracture or something else happened, tendonitis, or they ruptured an Achilles and something else is going on. And I see the opposite side of this, where I see athletes who, or older people who were athletes their entire life. They're starting to have to pay, they were robbing Peter to pay Paul their whole career, their athletic career, and now they're having to pay the price. And that's what I see on the back end of this. And so I'm not saying it's wrong to choose shoes like this, especially when your results can sometimes be the difference between millions of dollars. And so, although no, the shoe isn't the most important thing, right? And the shoe is not gonna turn you into LeBron or Kobe or MJ, that's ridiculous. Being in a shoe that you feel comfortable in and that you feel confident in is gonna make a big difference, because you're gonna feel better, you're gonna play better. And so I'm not saying it's wrong to prioritize this while your results are the difference between staying in the league or not, or making a lot of money or not, or winning a championship or not. That's all well and good. I'm just saying that there are definitely different priorities for amateur athletes versus professionals. So you have to keep that in mind. So even if someone you see is playing in a shoe and you think, like, how are they doing that? They're doing it because in 10 or 20 years, they're gonna be paying for it. They need these for they need their legs for a certain amount of time. And then after that, they're gonna be enjoying the spoils of all that money they made. So I hope this kind of made sense. I hope that this kind of helped you kind of sort through when you see a player wearing a certain thing on court. Remember, there's also sponsorships. Nike dominates, and Jordan Brand dominate the leagues, WNBA and NBA in terms of sponsorships. They dominate the ATP and the WTA too, to a lesser extent, but they do dominate. And so there is that, but you do see a lot of people who aren't sponsored by Nike wearing old Nike shoes, wearing old Kobe shoes, wearing old Jordans. So I mean, it's not just that. It's that Nike makes a shoe that, light, flexible, easy to move around. And so you also see that a lot of these professional athletes do not care about the most advanced foam and shank setups. That is not something they care about. They care about, is the shoe flexible enough? Can I get low to the ground in this? Is it speedy enough? Does it grip well enough? That's all they really care about. Remember, there are pros and cons to these, super stiff carbon fiber plated shoes and shoes with crazy types of midsole setups and thermoplastics. Yes, they're great, but thermoplastics are also a little bit unpredictable in terms of how bouncy they are and things like that. And so the shock absorption sometimes isn't where these other shoes are. And sometimes with a carbon fiber plate, you're not gonna be able to feel the ground as much. And so there's a lot of factors there and things that I might like for certain people in my practice that a professional athlete isn't going to want. So it's not always just about the sponsorships. There is, like I said, there is a huge push in these leagues to get as low to the ground as possible, as speedy as possible, and allow as efficient of footwork as humanly possible on court. And right now, it seems like the Kobes, the Kobe descendants, and the Kobe-esque shoes from other brands are the ones that are doing that for the most athletes. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below about this. And if you do want to see what I'm talking about, you want to see this video that I did about all the top shoes and the different trends that are happening in the NBA, make sure you click into that video right there. It's really some fascinating numbers. And make sure you subscribe down below. I'll see you in the next video.